we have pretty decent commission structure. At least I like to think. So acquisitions and dispositions, obviously, they only get paid as when the deals close. But with that, if they do need draws against it, I will do that. As long as someone has been with me for a while. Disposition does get paid less than acquisition. I will say that, and there are a couple of reasons for that. Acquisition is like the most important part of your wholesaling business, honestly, of your real estate business in general, right? Pretty much no matter what the field is. So acquisition's gonna get a bigger commission in comparison to the disposition because it's just more work and it's more important, right?
Hey guys, my name's Julian Castle, and today I got a great guest. He's a young guy in the game, and he's making pretty good money. He's been flipping for about 4 years, and he's now doing wholesaling as of 2025, mainly focusing on some assignments and novations. And we're really going to be talking about his journey, how he got into it, how he's been able to scale. He runs a 10-person team, and yeah, he's doing well. So I think he's someone we can learn from. So hey, Donovan, how you doing?
How's it going, man? Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you. Yeah, thank you for coming on. I want to get the listeners to know and understand you a little bit. So can you give us a little bit of background of where you at and how long you've been doing it and how old are you now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in real estate when I was 18. I had actually started a little bit before that in high school, like learning as much as I could about it. And, I've told this story plenty of times, but my first deal actually came my first week in college. So I was like
Mhm.
sitting outside of the cafeteria waiting for it to open, and I got a call from my realtor saying that they accepted my offer on the first property. And I was just like super happy. I was jumping up and down. No one was around me, so I was so excited about that. So I bought that one, flipped it, sold it, bought two more, sold those, and kind of just kept doing it from there. I've been doing that for about the past 4 years. Recently, though, this year, 2025 specifically, we have made a pivot and we've changed our strategies. Like we still have a bunch of flips on the books. I think we still have close to 20 flips that we own. However, we're trying to, I guess, kind of just hedge our bets on the wholesales and novations because they are faster. You can make money faster with them, and there's less risk. Usually, the money's not as much. However, it can be sometimes. So yeah, that's what we've been doing. Especially in this changing market.
Gotcha. And what is if you were to break it down, like how much revenue you're bringing in per business? Like, would you be able to tell us like what numbers you're bringing in now?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the wholesale business, the wholesale, when I say wholesale, I'll say wholesale novation, lump it in together as one. But
Mm.
that business, it depends on the month, of course. But it's pretty inexpensive to run compared to the flipping, right? Like, my marketing and overhead is like 25 grand a month. And then, I'm paying the team out on commissions, like, acquisition, disposition, they're getting paid out on commission. So it's not a crazy overhead. So if we bring in, 100 grand in a month, I'll probably take home half of that. However, with the flips, we were bringing in about $1 million a month. But with that, we had hundreds of thousands of dollars in expenses. At one point, I was paying like 200 grand a month in interest. And that was whether I sold a property or not.
Hmm.
I was paying my acquisition guys, I was paying, disposition, I was paying project management, I was paying for all the renovations. So, there were some months I would bring in, 1.2, $1.4 million, but sometimes a million would go back out, right? So it's just totally different businesses.
Gotcha. So you were telling us, Donovan, basically you were saying the breakdown of your revenue between the wholesaling business and then the flipping business. I think you said that you were getting into the flipping business.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, the businesses are just two completely different animals, right?
Mm.
The wholesale business has much less costs, right, in terms of running it. So, between our marketing budget, our overhead, and everything like that, we're only spending 25 grand or so per month to
Hmm.
run the wholesale side of things because the guys get paid on commission. So it's not like we're paying, acquisition and disposition a salary. They're only
Yeah.
getting paid when the deals close. So it's a lot easier from that perspective. Whereas, with the flips, we were just paying crazy amounts of money in interest, and I still am for some of the ones that I still have, but I was up to 42 properties at one point, 42 flips actually at
Yeah.
one point, and so I was paying like $200,000 a month in interest, and that's just crazy, and that's not even taking into account purchasing the properties, putting down payments, paying the contractors, paying the team, paying project management, paying acquisition, paying disposition, the office, other overhead. So most months we were spending at least 800,000 to $1 million. Now granted, some months did we bring in 1.2 $1.4 million? Yeah, absolutely. However,
Mm.
if there were houses that we didn't sell, for a month, you can go the other way really quick. And, some of
Mm.
that did start to happen in this changing market. So, with the wholesales, again, it's significantly less top line revenue. However, the
Mm.
risk is so much lower.
Gotcha. That's amazing. Okay, great. So so super. So now you're still doing flips, but you're spending a little bit more time on the wholesaling business because it's a less risky business. And um, do you have goals of expanding the business, or like what are your goals for that business?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So, to answer, in two parts, the wholesale business, of course, I always want to grow and scale and expand, as much as possible within reason.
Mm.
However, the flips we have scaled back on significantly. And
Yeah.
I have bought flips the last few months, but I was really picky about them. I was like, hey, we need to make 200 grand minimum on the flip because even if something goes wrong, we're still good on that. Whereas,
Yeah.
if we're making 40 grand on the flip, that that can turn into zero or that can turn into negative really fast in this market. So yes, we are trying to double down on wholesales and novations right now.
Super. Okay, great. So interesting. So let's talk about, I guess the different aspects of the business. So there's marketing first. So what are you doing for marketing when it comes to the flipping business? And then I'll ask you about the wholesaling business after.
Yeah. So for the flipping business, the marketing was pretty easy on that, right? It was minimal. It was more just branding than anything, because we
Mm.
always bought deals from realtors, from other wholesalers. Sometimes people would come directly to us or from our website, but we didn't really have to spend too much in marketing for the flips. However, for the wholesales, since we're trying to go direct to seller on all of them, we are spending more in marketing, and what we're doing is a mix. Obviously, we're still trying to brand just as much as before,
Hmm.
because that's important, having a recognizable brand. But we're running ads on Facebook. We are running ads on Google. So maybe even someone sees our Facebook ad and they maybe remember our name because they've seen it a few times. They'll go on Google and look us up and then find us there. So yeah, that's a Google conversion, but it came through a few times of people seeing it on Facebook. So those are our two main ones. And we do run ads in English and in Spanish as well. That's
Oh,
something
nice.
new we've implemented, because there's not, at least in our area, there's not a ton of competition for the Spanish speaking audience.
Nice. That's great. That's wonderful. And so typically, from from the beginning, like what does an ad look like? Like what is it? What does it say? Like what does it look like? What kind of, I guess, avatar are you attracting?
Yeah, so I mean, that's going to be kind of ever changing, but of course, we're trying to target the people that are, wanting to sell their house fast for cash, and more specifically, don't even want to deal with a realtor and don't want to deal
Mm.
with having to do repairs, or wait around for 6 months for their house to sell. Those are the people we're targeting. But we have to make changes all the time. Like, I mean, even right now, we filmed a new set of ads, and I think the messaging was just a little bit off on them. So
Mm.
we were getting a lot more leads. However, they weren't as qualified as they should have been, as some of the ones we were,
Right.
doing before. So, we're always, fine tuning it.
Gotcha. That's cool. And so, and I'm assuming you have an ad. Do you have a lead form that's a Facebook lead form, or do you take them to your website and then they opt in on your website? How does that process work?
Yeah. So we'll have a Facebook lead form, and they do everything on there, and it gets transferred right over into our CRM, and my acquisition guy will pick up the phone and give them a call as soon as possible. And speed to lead's a big one, but especially with Google, because if you don't pick up the phone and call them, they're gonna go search the next person, right? It's not as significant with Facebook, but Google 100%.
Yeah, for sure. So can you tell us a little bit about what you have in place? Like, I guess, let's say they fill out the form. Like you already mentioned, speed to lead is important. Like, do you text them right away, or like what are the things do you do or set in place? To, like, I guess lead nurture. Like the cadence or something. To like work the lead, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing we're doing a lot of manual follow up right now. Picking up the phone, calling. However, we seem to be getting better conversions with texting. I don't know about you, but like me personally, I get so many calls, and like most of the time I don't answer them. But if someone texts me, 99% of the time I answer it, right? So yeah, we've had a lot better luck doing that, and that's on both sides too. Whether we're trying to buy someone's house or whether we're trying to sell a deal, same thing. And most of our follow up is done that way. Email used to be a big one for us, but the laws changed, and people changed as well.
Yeah.
People used to we used to get like a 50% open rate. Now it's a 30% open rate, just because of some different laws, and people just naturally tend to gravitate away from that sometimes. Just their inbox gets so full with promotions and everything that they don't even look at it. They just hit delete sometimes. So it's a constant change. What I'm saying right now might not be the case in 6 months or a year.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. And how do you do your texting? I guess conversions. Like, do you have a script, or is it just I don't know. Like, how do you run your text game?
Yeah. So our our main outreach, our first thing that we do is call them, right? However, if we get them on the phone, great. That's ideal. However, if we don't, that's when we start texting them, and it's a pretty standard text. It's like, hey, so and so, I saw you submitted an inquiry about selling your house. We're happy to help you. We have a few options to provide. Give me a call when it's convenient. So it's just something very simple like that. Leaves it a little open ended. But on the flip side too, with selling deals, we actually like to leave that even more open ended. So like if my dispo guy calls someone, they don't answer, he's gonna say, "Hey, I have a deal in blank city, whatever it is, asking 300,000." And then that's basically, he's not giving too much information because he wants them to pick up the phone and either text him back or call him back.
Okay, cool, interesting. Okay, so you just text a question to kind of start a conversation over text, and then you just follow it up, and then try to get them on the phone eventually,
Yeah.
or do you close on text too, or is it
Yeah, I mean, we have closed on text for sure. But
nice?
if and when we do get them on the phone, we try to close it. If not in one call, ideally two. Of course, there are clients, and sellers that you have to follow up with 10 times and get them on the phone, for 45 minutes sometimes to close them. But normally, what we're pushing for is like, hey, first time you're on the phone with them, try to close them. If not, second time, get it done, because after that, your chances of closing them go way down.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. And so it's a lot of manual follow up the way you're working your business right now. And so is there like you don't do you, are you looking to implement any automations, like any text, like to send or anything you
Yeah.
could?
So what I was saying there was basically like the first week to 2 weeks of when we get a lead, the follow up is manual. However,
Mm,
later on, is when we put them into like an automated drip campaign. So we might have a 6 month nurture where they get hit, once a week, for 3 months, and then every 2 weeks for the other 3 months. After that, they can get put into our 5 year follow up campaign. So they'll just
Wow.
get hit with like, once a month here and there, texts, emails, whatever it is. And then, because at that point, if we get something great, if not, then it is what it is. But
Yeah.
yeah, so like we used to have everything like totally automated on the front end. However, we found that it actually, when you bombard people too much, they kind of like push away.
Mm.
Whereas when you say, hey, let me know if you want it. If not, no worries. I'll buy someone else's house. They're like, okay, like, well, let me see what they have to say. And, when you go away, people tend to like want to push towards you and you know be positive with you. However, if you're too pushy, you're just going to push people away. So it's kind of like a reverse psychology thing, but that's something that I was told by one of our coaches, and it really actually helped.
That's interesting. So just hit them, but lightly. Don't drill them so that they don't feel scared and go away.
Right.
All right.
And it works for some people, but at least where we are, and especially dealing with like older people too, they don't like that. I mean, even I personally don't like it. Like, if I submit a form for something and I get 50 text messages the first 2 days, I'm like, unsubscribe, right?
Yeah, totally. Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about the next part. So we talked about the lead nurture. I'm sorry, the lead. Now that you call them. Like, what's your closing like? Like you do training for your team, or you have a trainer that trains them. What's kind of the process and the sales process that you guys do?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, to answer your question as far as training, yeah, we're always on training. I'm a big proponent of constantly improving and constantly getting better. But we usually have two, sometimes three sales training calls a week. And we talk to other people and say, hey, what are you seeing that's working? What are you seeing that's not working? Are you slow? Are you busy? What is it? And for the most part, even around the country, people are seeing a lot of the same things we are, which is really interesting.
Hmm.
And it's kind of cool just to like talk to people about their markets and say, hey, this works in my market. Why don't you try it in yours? And just that networking aspect with people is really beneficial. Of course, the
Yeah.
dedicated sales trainings are absolutely important. Where you can get the strategies and know how to talk to people. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So you do sales training 3 times a week, and you talk about the market with other people. That's great. And so let me ask you this: the closing part. Now, on the people side, obviously you need people. Like, how are you able to like hire, the people that you work with? I mean, I'm sure this is a pretty big conversation because I mean you've hired people for flips, but also for your wholesale business. So I guess maybe you have some experience that you've kind of distilled down into some knowledge for us.
Right. Yeah, and I mean we could talk, all day about how to hire people and everything like
Great
that.
conversation.
However, with hiring people, I've always found the best way, at least in my small company, was word of mouth. Like I've never had to put a paid ad out, to advertise for anyone. That being
Mm.
said, you know, getting yourself out there and going to the local real estate meetups and getting yourself out on social media are big ones. Normally if I'm looking for someone to work for me, I put it out on my Instagram story. I'm like, hey, I need a project manager. Pay is potential 6 figures, commission only. Strong bonus structure. Usually I have 5 to 10 people that are interested, right? And then I can pick the best one. However, every once in a while we do get someone that calls and says, "Hey, I'm interested in working for you. I work for X company before." We've had those calls before. Those work, and we also, always put someone who's interested in applying for a job. First thing we do, obviously we talk to them, and the very second thing is we give them a predictive index test. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but they're really cool.
Yeah.
Tells you your personality type, how
Mm.
well. how you can communicate with other people, how other people can communicate with you effectively, what you're good at, what you may not be so good at. Like for me, I'm a very people oriented person. I get a lot of energy from talking to people and meeting people. However, you give me a bunch of tasks to do, I'm going to get burnt out fast, right? So I wouldn't be a good admin person. However, if I was going to hire an admin, I would make sure that she was very task oriented, doesn't have to be so people oriented. And, it just helps us put the right people in the right place.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. That's super cool. Um, so you talked a little bit earlier about brand. Even when you were talking about flipping, you're like brand is important. And obviously I mentioned you mentioned now that you also do social media, and that's a brand, right? So you get people from there. So what do you do, or what are your thoughts on brand? How have you built your brand, and for both business and personal?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, as far as brand goes, I mean, you can build brands in so many different ways. One that's free and very effective is social media. I can't tell you how many people I've either gotten deals from directly from social media, or that maybe I was going to do a deal with, and they didn't know who I was. They looked me up, they saw my social media, looked through it, felt like they knew me, and it made it that much easier to close the deal. And that can be for anything. That can be for finding new contractors, finding private money lenders, finding buyers for properties. Like, I've had people where I flipped a house in a certain community, and, some other people wanted it, wasn't the right time for them. They found out that I was flipping another house in that same community. They came directly to me and said, "Hey, I want to buy this house that you don't even have to put on the market. I'll give you whatever you want." Right? So, building a brand like that where people know you, number one, and know that you do good things, do good work. Those are big ones, and those are things I try to highlight in building a brand.
For sure. So what do you do? Like, what is your framework for, like, building a brand? I guess, like, posting content. Like, do you have, like, I'm gonna post this, or I'm gonna post, you know?
So I've been a little laxed on my content lately. However, it still brings in leads. However, if someone's starting out, I would say, don't just post about your business, right? Especially if you're in real estate. Like, there are parts of real estate that can be cool. Like, if you got squatters, or, you got someone, that trashed a house. Yeah, people like to see that, or they see transformations. But, a lot of times, it's kind of boring. Like, right? Like, no one
Yeah.
cares about you running numbers. No one cares about you signing your closing paper, right? Like that's boring stuff, right? You have to post stuff that is entertaining and is going to grab people's attention, and you got to post probably one or two videos of entertaining stuff for every you know one video of educational stuff, right? Because
Mm,
your entertainment videos are going to draw people in, and your educational videos are going to make them buy from you. If that makes sense.
gotcha. That makes sense. Cool, cool, cool. So, all right. And then, so that's the brand aspect of things. And so, on the people side, I guess on the wholesaling side, so you pay them, commissions, right?
Yeah.
For acquisitions and dispositions, and then I guess there's some costs. Like, do you know how much? So you're spending $25,000 a month, roughly, bringing in 100. Um, so, what's your kind of, I guess, your pay structure, and how much do you spend on marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and the 100 was an example I gave before. I think our average is a little more than that. It's probably 150 or so, and that's like been the last few months in the summer where it's slow here in Florida. Usually the
Hmm.
winter we see a lot more activity. So I would expect those numbers to go up significantly in the next 12 months, with
Nice.
relatively the same spend, right? So
Yeah.
depending on the month, our
Hmm.
marketing spend is between 10 and 20,000. Most of the time it's going to sit around that 15, 16 $1,000 mark.
Hmm.
Again, depends on the month, but that's a
Hmm.
general guideline. Other than that, there's just general overhead, right? So, office expenses, softwares, things like that. So, that you're going to pay no matter what. So that being said, you know, sorry, I got people out my window here.
It's okay.
Yeah, but no. That being said, we have a pretty decent commission structure. At least I like to think. So acquisitions and dispositions obviously they only get paid as when the deals close. But with that, if they do need draws against it, I will do that. As long as someone has been with me for a while. Disposition does get paid less than acquisition. I will say that, and there are a couple of reasons for that. Acquisition is like the most important part of your wholesaling business, honestly, of your real estate business in general, right? Pretty much no matter what the field is. So acquisition's gonna get a bigger commission in comparison to the disposition because it's just more work and it's more important, right? If you don't buy the deal right, you don't get it at the right price, you are, probably not going to sell it, or if you do, you're not going to make much money on it. That being
Yeah.
said, disposition is still important, and with that, um, we like to pay disposition usually around 10% of the deal, of the profit on the deal, I should say, and we get deals from everyone else. So like if there are multiple acquisition guys in the office, like let's say there are two acquisition guys, Dispo is going to get deals from both of them because it's far less work. Like if the deal's good enough, the deal's going to sell itself. It's not going to be too
Yeah.
much in the Dispo guys end. So all that being said, Dispo is going to make less per deal. However, since it takes less of their time, they can do more deals. So it evens out.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay. And then, so curious on the novation side. So you being a flipper prior to being a wholesaler, right? You have a lot of experience when it comes to renovations. So, in some of these novations, I know that sometimes they may need a little work. Like, do you get your hands dirty in those deals? Like, for example, if something doesn't pass inspection, you have to fix some things. You get in there, or like, what do you do? In that scenario, what are you
Yeah.
doing?
So, for me, you're not gonna catch me, at the job site, swinging a hammer. That's just not, that's not what I do. That's not how I like to run my business. Some people do it, and that's fine. However, I like to be able to delegate all those things for a few reasons, right? Like number one, I just don't want to do it. That's just doesn't sound like fun to me.
Yeah.
However, number two, I'm not probably not that good at it. And number three, if I'm going and doing that, that's 20, 30, 40, $50 an hour work. I'm not doing the eight, $900,000 an hour work, which is overseeing the team. And even before that, like even when I was smaller, I used to manage the projects myself, and I would be going to the Home Depot for the guys and picking up material, and I would be losing out on getting new deals because I was at Home Depot. Isn't that stupid? You miss out on a thirty
Yeah.
thousand dollar deal because you're going and picking out 2x4s when you could just pay
Yeah.
the guy an extra $30 and he can go do it. So, I tried to stop that as soon as possible. Um, so yeah, I like to have, the team do that. And, even if I didn't have a team, I would put that on the contractors or subcontractors that I was working with.
For sure. So, I mean, you don't personally do the work, but if there's an Novation deal that, let's say the roof needs to be fixed, like you'll hire someone like in your to
Yeah.
do it so that it can get sold to the buyer, right?
Yeah, so like with our novations, the way we typically pitch it is like, we'll try not to put any money into it, right? However,
Right.
if something comes in, from the inspection and they say, hey, we need the electrical panel changed because we can't get insurance on it otherwise, okay, cool. We'll go spend 1,800, 2 grand to put in a panel right before closing, after we get the clear to close, or conditional clear to close, because we don't want to go and improve a property that's not ours, and give someone a free panel if the deal doesn't work out, right?
Right.
That's just too much of a risk. So yeah,
Yeah.
we will do that for clients, and that is part of the benefit of selling with us rather than, realtor. Your realtor's probably not going to do that. So, we will take care of that for you within reason, right?
For sure. That makes sense. Totally understand. Great. And so what when you're doing novations, like what is your average deal size? Like your average profit,
Yeah.
Is
So on novations, we usually shoot to make 30,000, but that also has on top of it a $5,000 repair budget. So,
right.
if everything goes perfectly, we don't have to make any repairs. We in theory should make 35,000 on it. Wholesale's a little less because it's less work. It's just easier. So we shoot to make 20 to 25 on wholesales. The thing about wholesales, they're also faster too. So,
Hmm.
we're willing to take a little bit less on those.
For sure. And your market mainly is South Florida, or like I guess like you mentioned, I think you said it from Miami to like Orlando or something, or
So
what?
yeah, being where we are, we're like right in between Miami and Orlando,
Hmm.
about 2 hours from each, a little less. So we kind of go an hour in each direction is where I like to say we go. However, and that was pretty strict for flips, right? Like we didn't really go outside of that. However,
Yeah.
for the wholesales and novations, as long as it's not like a crazy rural area, we are able to branch out and we can go up to Jacksonville. We can go into the Panhandle, into the West Coast because we don't need to be there at the properties. Like we can go send someone to take pictures and put a lockbox on the property for $50, $60,
Mhm.
and it allows us to do more. So we've started to branch into other counties in Florida.
Gotcha. And it mainly is Florida where you're operating, right?
Yeah, yeah, we're not marketing anywhere else other than a few counties in Florida. We did try nationwide. I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, and it just wasn't ideal, right? Like we were getting bad leads in bad markets where you couldn't wholesale or where there were no buyers. So we pulled the plug on that. I do know people that do that and that are successful, but we're just not doing that right now. We're trying to double down on Florida.
For sure. And so tell me a little bit about your cost per lead or cost per deal, if you know those numbers.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So our cost per lead, we changed marketing agencies. I probably want to say right around the beginning of this year. With our old agency, we were getting Google leads anywhere between 250 and 350. Sometimes there were spikes and they went higher. However, with our new agency, we are getting usually sub $200 Google PPC leads.
Nice.
And every once in a while, if it's a good month or something, they'll be in the like low 100s. Most of the time, they're in like the mid to high hundreds. Um, Facebook, or I should say Meta, so Facebook and Instagram, those
Yeah.
leads have become significantly cheaper for us. When we first started, we were getting like $38 leads, $45 leads. They're really good. Our cost has gone up a little bit since then, especially on our English ads. We're hovering right around $55, $60 a lead, which is still pretty good. Um, However, with our Spanish leads, I think I even saw it as low as like $28 a lead, just because there's a lot less, competition running ads in
Yeah.
Spanish. I'm sure that'll change, but that's what I'm seeing now.
It's very interesting. So tell me a little bit about the Spanish. So you have Spanish speakers on your sales team, right? And
Yes.
is it just like a normal deal that you do in English? Like you
Yeah.
just normal?
Yeah. Yeah. Just different language. That's all. Well, and the reason for that was, and I actually got to give credit to my acquisition guy Jose. He was the one that was like, "Hey, man, like a lot of these leads are speaking Spanish, or like they don't speak very good English, and then I talk to them in Spanish, and it's much easier." He's like, "You ever thought about marketing in Spanish?" I was like, "Oh, not really. That's a good idea, so we should try it." So that that was I'll give credit to him on that one.
Oh, that's super cool. Awesome. So okay, so you were saying you're getting sub 200, and then on PPC, and then on Facebook, somewhere around 50, right? Um,
Yeah, 50 you could say like on average between English and Spanish.
And so how many leads does it take for you to get a deal?
So again, this is this is totally going to depend on the month, right? If
Right.
you ask me like the last 2 months, we were closing like 1 in 15 probably.
Okay.
However, a few months before that, we were closing like 1 in 5, 1 in 6.
Wow.
So it was real good. However, we were really dialed in, really niche on our marketing. So the leads that came, yes, like we got fewer leads. However, they were much more qualified, right?
Hmm.
We made some changes in the marketing once that started to slow down. Now we got a lot more leads, cheaper cost per lead. They weren't as qualified, the last few months. So we're closing 1 in 15 or more. It could be up to 20. I don't have it in front of me, but I could probably figure that out. But
Right.
it's ever
Yeah.
changing with marketing and sales.
For sure. Okay. So you had before more qualified ads, and you were having a cost like per lead that was higher, and you were closing more. Like and then now you dial down your marketing a little bit, and you have more leads coming in, and then you have you're closing, but in larger numbers. More
Yeah,
leads.
yeah, definitely. And I woay say, hey, if it's not broken, let's not fix it here. However, the thing is, the ads, especially on Facebook, Google not so much, but they do get fatigued, right? So like
Yeah.
Facebook is going to put it out to anyone that should be interested in it, and by the time these people have seen it like 20 times, they're either buying or they're either going to fill out the form or they're not, right? They're it's not going to make that much of a difference. So we had to change the ads a bit, and that's why we did it. In 6 months we'll probably go back and run those same ads again and have a new set of people and convert better. But you just can't necessarily, especially on Facebook, run the same ad every time. TV is a little different. TV, you can basically run the same ad, essentially, for a long time.
For,
So, but yeah, like I said, it's
for,
ever changing.
yeah. Yeah. Cool. And then so you're closing. I mean, on average, what does it take to? You're closing like cost per deal is 1,000 or 2,000. If you're spending 200 or like, I mean, it
Yeah,
depends on Google or Facebook. So
right. Yeah, it depends. I will say like our Google ads or our Google leads are usually a lot more qualified because someone is selling, searching up, hey, I need to sell my house fast for cash. Whereas, on Facebook, they might just be scrolling on Facebook on their lunch break and it pops up like, oh, yeah, let me see what I could get for my house. Right. So, it's going to depend on that. But yeah, we try to be sub 2,000. Again, that fluctuates a little bit. Sometimes it might go up to 2,500. But yeah, that's usually where we like to be. It's around 2 grand.
so 2 grand, and then you have 30 around on average is what you get back.
Correct. Yes. And that's, that 30 is before paying the team. So, the
Right.
team will get paid out of that.
For sure. Okay. Cool. So tell us. Okay. So we talked about the sales aspect. Tell us a little bit about the dispositions. So I'm sure you have a pretty unique way of doing that since you also flip homes. So maybe you can give us some pretty good advice on how to
Yeah.
disposition. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny that you say that because a lot of people ask me, especially when I started, marketing for, that we were just doing more wholesales and we were selling investment properties. A lot of people were like, "Huh, that's interesting." I figured you would just buy these. I was like, well, yes. However, we have to change a little bit here. Um, but that being said, is I see the side of the buyers, right? So I'm like, hey, I understand the buyer, the flipper has to take all the risk on the deal, right? Like the wholesaler doesn't really have any risk, other than their marketing dollars and a little bit of overhead. The flipper is the one that takes all the risk in terms of funding the deal, renovating the deal, having to sell it on the retail market, potentially going over timeline, potentially going over budget. So, we understand that. Of course, we try to price the deals accordingly. We're going to try to get, the most amount possible. However, if a flipper is coming to us with a legitimate offer, I'm going to respect that, right? I'm not going to go and say, hey, screw you. You offered me 30 grand under my list price. We'll call them up and be like, okay, hey, walk me through this. Like, how'd you get to this number? Because that'll help me on the acquisition side get better deals for you in the future, right?
Oh, I see. Okay. So even though you lock up the deals for novations, and you could dispo them, for that price, the retail price. Sometimes you will entertain flippers that come in and bid on your properties at the number where it would make sense for them as a flipper, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it depends, right? Um, recently we've gotten more wholesale deals than novations, but a couple months ago we were getting like six novations for every like one or two wholesale deals. So the novations, yeah, every once in a while we get like a flipper to buy it, but most of the time they're priced a little closer to retail. So someone that buys it is probably going to live there. Whereas
Yeah.
like our off market, our wholesale stuff, yeah, obviously we're selling mainly to flippers and to landlords. So again, I try to have the guys talk to them and say, hey, tell me how you got here, tell me what comps you're looking at, tell me what you think the reno is, so we can take that information and give it back to acquisition, and they can use it in the future, or if we need to go for a reduction with the seller, they can use that as leverage with the seller.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. Awesome. And then for your wholesale, how are you selling these deals? Um,
So, yeah, good question. So we are, usually putting the deals on Investor Lift. We are, we have our own buyers list, of course. So usually when we lock up a deal, after we get pictures and everything, the deal is going to go blasted out on our buyers list to all of the, buyers who are looking in that location. It's going to get put on Investor Lift, and we'll blast it out to buyers who are not on our list. You pay a little bit for it with Investor Lift, and it's also going to, if we don't get anything from that, usually within like the first day or two, we're going to pick up the phones and we're going to start calling. We have a software called Investor Base. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's super cool
yeah.
because you can go and search up flippers and landlords near your subject property. So like let's say you put in your address at 123 Main Street. I can search for flippers within a 2 mile radius of that house, and I can get their name and phone number, and I pick up the phone and call them, and I said, hey, I saw you had a house on 345 Main Street. I have one at 123 Main Street. It's close to what you paid for your house. Are you interested in taking a look? A lot of times, if they had a house that was very comparable, they're like, yeah, absolutely. I know how to renovate, a house in that area, and I know what it sells for. I'm definitely interested. So that's been, one I've been trying to have the guys do and push to get our deals sold.
That's cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet. Um, all right. And so mainly the markets, the Florida market, overall, like what do you see per like price points, where you're purchasing at? Are they $200,000 houses, 300, 400? Like what's kind of the price range on those?
Yeah. So, in terms of our flips, our average, we're probably purchasing around $700,000 on average, and an average rent is like 250 for the properties we're doing, at least now in this market, right?
Mm,
However, for the wholesales, usually it's lower price points. Like we're usually not locking stuff up at more than like 350. Again, it depends on the market. Sometimes we'll have something at 700 grand, and we try to sell it for 750. But most of the time, they are lower end houses for the wholesales where we do get those discounts. The novations, they're a bit all over the place. I would say we're still keeping the novations under like 700 grand. We're not going for crazy expensive novations like that. And that's just not what we're marketing for.
yeah, I gotcha. Cool. So tell me a little bit about what has been the best money you've ever spent.
So I think probably the best money I've ever spent was on education, and not just like buying a course online, right? I don't think I've ever done that. I mean, as like in-person events with other real estate investors, and getting to talk to them, getting to meet them, getting to hear the speakers in person, and going up and asking them questions afterwards. That's gonna be invaluable, right? Like that's not that took years off of. what I had to learn, right? Like I was able to learn from other people who had done it, and just go and implement it right away. So I would say spending money on education is the best return on investment that I've received.
So what particular like program or event did you spend money on, and like what kind of things did you learn from it?
So one of the guys that helped me a lot was Ryan Pineda. He and he still does, and we talk now and then, and he's just given me a lot of good advice. Him personally, as well as some of the guys on his team. I know like the Boakley brothers out of Vegas. They helped a lot. We talked, got personal with our deals, and just said, hey, this is what works for me, and we would bounce ideas off of each other and stuff like that. And they gave me a lot of tools that helped me in terms of just building out the systems that we use now. So that those two were big ones.
Nice, nice, pretty good. So cool. So uh, you know, getting into it, when we're talking about like flipping now, so you're doing the higher end flips now, and I guess what's your standard on the flips? Like, what deal would you take down, and what deal won't you take down now that you're added this other, thing to your whole business,
Right. Yeah. So like I kind of mentioned earlier, I'm trying to really only do the deals when I say deals, like the flips that actually can make a lot of money, right? Like I used to do flips for 30, 40 grand when I knew that I could sell the house right away for asking price. That was fine, right?
Yeah.
Now in this market, houses are sitting for, sometimes months on the market, and they're selling for far below asking price sometimes. Sometimes they go right away, but sometimes they don't, right? So, that being said is, I'm just building a big cushion for myself. So usually, you're not going to make 200 grand on a $300,000 house most of the time. So you have to buy the, five, six, seven, $800,000 houses, put 250 into them, and sell them for 1.1 million, 1.4 million. That's where we can make those type of spreads. So those are the flips we're looking at for the wholesales and novations. We're a lot more flexible on those because we're not taking so much risk. But yeah, if we think it has good investor activity, if it's a wholesale, we'll buy it at the right price, or we'll put it under contract at the right price. Novation, same thing. If it's got the right market activity, and it's in a part of the market that's busy and it's hot or somewhat hot, we will take those down.
Cool. Awesome. 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 So let's talk a little bit about culture. So, you have a team of people, right? There's a culture, in place, right? I'm sure.
Absolutely.
What is the culture that you do with your team? Like, how do you build them? How do you, maintain them happy and, all that?
Yeah. So, obviously with people, it's not going to be perfect, right?
Yeah.
Like I said before, I'm a very people-oriented person. My personality type, wants everyone around me to be happy, right? Like that's one of my personality traits. So of course, I'm gonna do what I can to keep people happy and to make sure that they do enjoy their job and enjoy coming, to the office and working. Is that perfect all the time? No, absolutely not. And anyone that tells you it is, they're probably not telling the truth.
For sure.
But that being said, is you got to be reasonable with people. You got to be kind, courteous when you're talking to them. Like you ever hear those people who are like, oh, I hate my boss. He's such a jerk. Those. I never wanted to be that type of person. I wanted to be the type of boss or leader, whatever you want to call it, that people felt like they could talk to, and that they didn't hate, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Another thing that I tell people before I hire them is like, hey, these are our core values, right? And they're on the wall in our office. So it's positivity. You got to just be positive. You can't be negative all the time. Integrity. So don't lie to me, right? Do what you say you're gonna do.
Yeah.
Effort. give effort. If you're gonna do something, do it right. Do it to the best of your ability. Don't do things halfway. And be a team player. Like work well with others. Don't be gossiping. Don't be complaining. And if you want to complain to me, that's fine. Like, hey, Donovan, I got this issue. That's totally fine. But don't be, going and starting drama in the team or anything like that, right? Like you can talk to me. That's kind of a big one for me. I don't like that. So I've had to let people go over that in the past.
Yeah. So you value positivity, effort, teamwork, and the other one was integrity.
Integrity. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. So looking at the way you live your life now, like what does a day in your life look like? Like what do you do? You know?
Yeah. So, being that, now that I have this team and, I've even had a bigger team when we were doing more flips. However, the flips, required a lot more of my work and a lot more of my time. So, I was, you know, I am probably bringing in, net profit now, pretty close to what we were doing at the peak. However, I'm working like a quarter as much, right? A big one for that was bringing in an operations manager. Totally changes the game, right? To answer your question about what a day currently looks like, normally on weekdays, I'll wake up, I'll do some work, from my phone in the morning. I'll get into the office between 9 and 10, and I do work that I need to do in the office. I talk with the team, I meet with them. Then after that, usually in the afternoons, is when I'm a little more free. Depends on the day, but sometimes I go out, I get a golf lesson like I did yesterday.
Nice.
I have more free time for that. I am starting a couple new businesses now, so that will likely change in the next probably month or two. And I will be working a bit more now on those new businesses. But now that I've done it before, it's not going to be that hard to do it again, right? Like it was the first time.
Yeah. Cool. If you don't mind sharing with us, how much are you making net profit?
So again, gonna depend on the month. But if I can bring home like 100 grand a month, like that's I would consider that like a good month, right? Like bottom line after paying all expenses, after paying everything, right? Again, some months it's significantly more than that. So every once in a while it's 400 grand. That's just kind of the way real estate
Yeah.
goes.
Yeah.
But I am also exploring some other options and just how to get monthly reoccurring revenue that doesn't require much or any of my work. And that being said, if I can get to like 100 grand a month of that, then I can choose whether I work or not the rest of my life.
Right.
So
So you're looking at outside investments, you know, out of, you know, having a business essentially, which would pay you passively, right? Or I guess with less work, right?
yeah. So
So
like the wholesale business, right? Like that doesn't really require me. Like I'm in when it's necessary, but like if I said I go to my operations manager, I'd say, hey, you 100% take over this. That would be fine, right? And I could make passive income, and I say that in air quotes.
right.
However, I am looking at buying some other, bigger, rental property. I'm, looking into monthly recurring revenue businesses, things like that, that are just a lot less work, more consistent, more automated. That's, one other thing for me.
Gotcha. Cool. Super. And so tell us a little bit about that operations, like the people side again. So you mentioned the hiring your operations is a big thing. It seems like hiring is a big thing, obviously to scale. So like what is it? And what was it that you've done? You know.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I did it, in terms of like hiring people, like the first person I hired was actual like employee was a project manager. I hired two of them to manage my projects, right?
Mm,
Before that, though, I hired a bookkeeper, which they're their own their own company. However, they like integrate almost like an employee, right? So I was
Yeah.
like, I'm not keeping my own books, right? Like that's just a task I'm not good at. I can pay someone fairly, inexpensively to do, right?
Yeah.
After that, I said, hey, I am so busy managing these projects that I'm missing out on deals. I need someone to be a project manager. Pay you a few
Mm.
grand for the house. I'll go and buy hopefully 2, 3 new deals with the time that I'm saving not managing a project.
Mm.
After that, I hired acquisition, because I was so busy going and driving and seeing properties that I didn't have time to actually, run the business and, check on the jobs, build the systems, everything like that. After that, I was able to work on the systems and work on the processes. And once I was able to get all of those things in place, that's when I hired my operations manager to come in and take all those systems and processes that I built and run with those, right? So that's kind of the idea with that. And of course, we still work, closely together. It's not like I just said, "Hey, here's everything. Goodbye." Right? That's just not,
Yeah.
not not what I did. But the good thing is my operations manager had experience and worked for a company that was doing something very similar to what we were before. So that helped as well quite a bit.
Nice, nice. So it seems like the a common factor here is the system and processes. How'd you go about building your system and processes to be able to delegate to your operations manager?
Yeah, that's a great question. And operations manager or anyone else in the company, what I did is I just started writing down everything that I did, right? And I would refine it as I did it again. I would refine it. I was like, okay, I missed this, this, and this step. I'm gonna add that in, and I would just create, pretty easy SOPs, standard operating procedures, that I could just hand off and be like, hey, here's the list in order of how to do it. That's how I started. Now with softwares and project management tools and everything like that, you can automate it and it'll actually task the person and tell them what they need to do and when they need
Mm.
to do it.
Yeah.
That was a big one that actually was not as difficult as I thought it would have been.
Mm.
But that was another one, and of course too, a big one is hiring the right person. Like you don't want a person that's just gonna blindly follow orders. Like you want them to
Mm.
think for themselves and problem solve themselves and give them ownership of their role. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Okay. Cool. So you wrote everything down, um, and then you then created like some SOPs on it, and then gave it to them. So what's your software stack? You know, for your
Yeah.
business.
So our internal like task management software is Asana. That's been great for us. It helps us track project management. Where the properties are. Are they in? Are they under contract for purchase? Are they under contract for sale? Are they under renovation? Are they in pre-listing?
Mm.
Are they inspection repairs? Whatever it is. It tracks the categories.
Yeah.
It allows us to give tasks, keep communication clear through all of it. We use Google Workspace, just for like our emails and Drive and Sheets and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a huge spreadsheet guy. I can make them, I can use them, but I would prefer just like a pre-built out software that has some automations and things like that. Our signing software for our when we send out contracts and stuff is PandaDoc. I really like that, especially like over like DocuSign, because you can actually go with the person like when they're signing, and like I said, we're trying to sign them on the phone. You
Yeah.
can go and see when they're signing in real time, how long they're looking at the page, and just walk them through as they're following along, which you can't do necessarily with DocuSign.
Nice.
Um, we use Follow Up Boss for our CRM. We used to be on Go High Level. I didn't love their automations, so we switched over and did Follow Up Boss for just dealing with clients, and when our leads come in, that's where they go, and that's where the guys call out of. It records all the calls,
Mm.
and trust me, that saved us plenty of times in the past. So
Really? Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Super. Okay. Cool. All right. Interesting. So sweet. So that's pretty good. And what do you think? Like, what do you think has attributed to your success? Like, if if you if you were to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I would probably say is if I have an idea or I get an idea from someone else or whatever it is, and it's a good idea, I'm gonna go ahead and implement it as soon as possible. I'm not just gonna like, sit on it and think about it for 6 months. Like if it's a good idea, it'll get implemented right away. That's been a big one, and I think that's what's allowed me to do everything I have as fast as I have done it. Um, the other thing is, and this is not something that's necessarily easy for everyone, but is being willing to take risks, right? Of course, calculated risks. You're not gonna, be jumping in blind necessarily. But
Yeah.
I had the privilege of, starting when I was super young. I didn't really have anything to lose, so I did it, and so far it's worked out. However, not everyone necessarily has that luxury. Maybe, you got kids, you got, big mortgage you got to pay, whatever it is, right?
Mm,
And not to say that you can't do it. You just have to be a little more calculated, maybe than I was with it.
right.
But, definitely don't get like analysis paralysis. Like, that's
Mm,
one I see with people so many times. Like, you can't just think about it forever. Like, at some point, you have to do it and you have to take action.
yeah. Okay. Cool. And then so mostly where'd you learn from? Like, was it YouTube University or like I guess now maybe later? I mean, you're getting to the wholesaling business, so did you pay a mentor or like how do you how has learning progressed for you?
Yeah, so when I was in high school and I was like learning, sitting in my English class, watching YouTube videos about real estate, that's what I did a lot at the beginning. Then once I was able to get enough cash to actually, you know, buy into like a mentorship program, a mastermind, I did that. I think I want to say in 2024, I spent close to 200 grand just on like training, right, and
Mm,
education,
yeah.
um, which was great. I'm not spending quite that much now. Maybe closer to like 50 grand.
Yeah.
But I spent a bunch of money on it, and it was well worth it, right? Because
Yeah.
like I said before, that's like the best investment you can make is in yourself and in your education.
For sure. Cool. All right. So, Donovan, what would you like people to take away? At the end of this podcast. Or in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest thing that I always like to tell people is like, if you have a good idea and you're confident in yourself, go do it, right? There's no need for you to just sit on the sidelines and let time go by. So if you want to do something, you want to start your business, you want to start investing in real estate, start doing it sooner than later.
Cool. Awesome. And where can people find you? Now.
Yeah, so I'm fairly active on social medias, pretty much on almost all of them: YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of those. I also have a good website, so CamarottiHomes.com, just my last name, homes.com. Reach out to me there. So yeah,
That sounds great. Awesome. All right. Well, we look forward to following up on your success and keep educating us on how you're doing things and what you're doing. So it was
yeah.
great.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right.